My name is Staffan Tast. I work for SATO Corporation in St. Petersburg. SATO is a real estate investment company, one of the biggest owners of residential real estate in Finland, with more than 20,000 rental homes in our portfolio, and we started investing in Petersburg a bit less than 2 years ago, so well in time to be on board at the very top of the recent peak, which was a great pleasure. I'd like to start by asking anyone, to read out loud what's written on this first slide in big letters. We've been there for a while now, so. Opportunity is now here. You're an entrepreneur. That's great. This, of course, is nothing very scientific at all, but it's just a small trick, which is perhaps descriptive of what I want to talk about. That in most cases, including economic slowdowns, nothing is so black and white. There's always, your reality depends on how you decide to see things, how you decide to look at things, and what in the not black and white reality you decide to focus on. So what I want to talk about is are bad times good times for an entrepreneur? Of course, again, as all presentations here, it's a Russian perspective, and I want to start with a more macro analysis by looking at, we can say we experience the third crisis or slowdown or whatever in modern Russia's history, which started in '91, the same year that I finished school. So let's first look at these difficult crises. Times in Russia, I don't know if anyone can read that, but we go back to '91, which is a very dramatic year. Of course, the Soviet state collapses, the economy collapses, state-controlled trade collapses, as this country certainly experienced the hard way also when it through that went into its worst recession in modern times, losing a Soviet trade. Entire cities, production stops, entire cities in the Soviet economy become economically not viable, with factories that don't work anymore. People lose their life savings, their jobs, basically their bread, and lots of previously prestigious professions become worthless. Poverty increases, GDP drops, crime rates go up. So it's a very dramatic year, to be sure. That could, of course, have brought us much more drama than it did. But nevertheless, it's a dramatic year with lots of devastation for many people. Then we have a few chaotic years in the new modern, young Russian Republic. 7 years later, we have another crisis that everyone here probably remembers quite well, '98. The East Asia crisis and the ruble crash. Again, quite dramatic. The ruble loses 3/4 of its value. Again, lots of people lose their savings, certainly their ruble savings. Companies that have currency debts, currency loans, and ruble income, of course, are in big trouble. So, and the cost of anything imported goes up in price manifold. So again, it's economically, it's a dramatic year again. Then we go forward again 10 years to our days, 2008, and again we have a crisis. This time a global crisis, but also a crisis that sees the backbone of modern Russia's economy break. Essentially, the oil price crashes, and the Russian economic boom of this decade comes to a halt. So that's it's all crisis. It's all bad. Lots of bad news. And if we focus to see only this, it's pretty bleak indeed. But of course, there's always, in every crisis, there is an opportunity. So let's flip the coin and look at the other side of it. I'd say that in '91, despite all the difficulties that were to follow, the positive sides of that coin are at least as dramatic, or were at least as dramatic as the negative side, if we decide to look at that. For the first time in the lifetime of probably everyone in this room, doing business in Russia actually becomes legal. You can be a speculator without being put into prison. trade and travel become legal. You can do it. Anyone can travel anywhere with anyone, anytime you want, if you get a visa, of course. Expressing your thoughts, saying what you think about things, about anything, becomes legal. These are really dramatic things. And all these huge shortcomings in the Soviet economy, the inefficiency, how things work, all of a sudden it becomes every entrepreneur's challenge to change. Anyone can do something about these shortcomings. Anyone has the right to start a company and provide better bus services or whatever. So it's truly an opportunity of historical proportions. I think many of us often do not realize how dramatic the positive side of this the events this year also are. And I think we're still living in of course we haven't still seen, we still have difficulty getting that perspective, but it's very, very dramatic. In '98, again, many companies, many investors decided the dream of a Russian boom was an illusion. But actually, with the ruble crisis, production all of a sudden becomes much more competitive in Russia. It starts to make sense to produce stuff in Russia, not only import. And any export that you might be into becomes, of course, much more competitive if you're ruble-based. And now again, we're in a crisis, but certainly for the ones who want to see them, there should be lots of opportunities. In my own field, real estate, of course, both for investors and for retailers using real estate, all of them are much more accessible if you have the long-term perspective to get into it. Construction costs, for example, are down, and I think in the economy in general, the whole idea of value for money, of not overpaying, of being efficient, also come up to become more hip than they were at the final years of the previous boom, when many things got inflated and overpriced. So then that's the opportunity. Let's look with hindsight at how was this capitalized. Again, it's quite dramatic. What happened after '91? Modern Russia's first private enterprises were built in almost in any field, in service, in trade, in transport, in food production. A whole new infrastructure of private companies serving the economy was pretty much built from scratch, or from the ashes of the Soviet disaster. '98, the year that many international investors, and I'm sure many Russian investors, decided that the dream of a Russian boom was an illusion, pulled out, makes no sense to invest in Russia. Well, we clearly now can say that was a pretty stupid move. That was going to be the start of an unprecedented boom in the Russian economy. In the last 10 years, we've seen an explosion of new middle class, living standards in big cities approaching European levels, and the breadth of middle class probably never seen in Russia, perhaps ever before. So again, this boom in the last 10 years, we can now see was quite dramatic, and now it feels weird to have pulled out in the year '98, as some people did. Now, of course, we can't see the future. We don't know what we will say with hindsight, looking back in 10 years, what the opportunities actually were. We can only guess. But if you want to look positively at things, perhaps we can at least hope for a broader economic base, a broader economic system in Russia. We can hope for also more desperation, perhaps from the state side in decreasing, in fighting corruption and over bureaucracy, and basically getting more efficiency into the system. It's the fact that, for example, cost 1 kilometer of asphalt paved road in Russia cost 4 times more to build than in most of the European Union, of course, is pretty descriptive, and a huge problem given the need for more road construction in Russia. Why do we pay 4 times more? I'm sure a lot of people can guess, but that's just one of the huge inefficiencies that have to be fought if the economy is to be developed.